We are prepared today.
We are now. Let me see. Is that even disposed? Okay. This way. Yeah. Well, hello, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I wanted to meet with you today and go over the lesson that I observed in your classroom. First, I want to ask you. Tell me about how the lesson that I observed. How do you think that went?
I think it went good. For the majority, they were engaged. There was a little silliness on the carpet, but I think, I think it went well. They comprehended what we were learning, the concept. So I think I would say it went good.
Okay. In what ways do the activities, resources, technology, and instructional material align to the instructional goals? So like the material that you choose, the activities that y'all did in the classroom, and the material you chose, how do they align with your instructional goals, your TEKS?
Well, we were working on decomposing the number 6, and so we just used like snap cubes to do that. So it was like tactile, they can like touch it and look at it. Most of my lessons are like Promethean board based, which is where I get my technology from, and sometimes I'll have them come up and do it on the Promethean board or move things around on it. And I think it just helps them see it like in a bigger picture than like on a piece of paper in front of them. So I think that was it.
Okay. Why do you think it's important to have academic expectations for students that are high and demanding?
Because that they can like reach the goals. If I set like high goals for the kids, then and I expect them to reach it and I help them get there, then they can do it.
Okay.
And it just helps them grow to know like where we're heading. I think it just helps them.
Okay. How do you plan for activities, your materials, assessments that are sequenced and relevant to the students?
The week before, I'll go through like this math lesson I went through, our curriculum book Eureka, and I went through every section that it wanted me to teach. I looked at the materials that I would use or that it told me, and then I thought, okay, this doesn't hold my kids' attention. I don't have it in the classroom, so it's not a material that we actually have. And so how can I change that to better suit my kids' needs and that like we actually have it in the classroom. And then I just went through to see what's a little above my kid's head and what's too far below. We do review some, but our curriculum book has us reviewing things that are beginning of the year, which kind of doesn't, it takes time away from things that we could be learning more of right now. And so I just go through and look at the materials we need, how we use them in the classroom. And
okay. Well, you said that the curriculum book, how do you mean that it's low? Explain that a little bit more.
Well, this is the first year we're using the book. Well, it's the first year I see any curriculum book. But we had this thing the first week of school, and it's still having us do that, which is sunrise, sunset, which is we just count to 5 from 0, and then we move all the way up like a sunset, like with our bodies from the ground up all the way to 5, and then we do it backwards. But as of right now, our kids should be able to count to 50. So I ex-nay that. Sometimes we'll do it to 50, but it takes a little longer. So there's just things that are my kids are more advanced in. So I try to tweak those to make sure that we're using our time efficiently and catered towards my kids' needs.
Okay. Is this using the Eureka math?
Yeah.
Okay. So being that the Eureka, like you said, the Eureka math is lower, or what they're asking you to do, in what ways do the activities, resource, and technology and the instructional material align to the instructional goals? So you just said that Eureka Math doesn't always align to the goals.
Right.
So kind of explain a little bit more about how you choose the different things to make sure that they're aligned with the TEKS.
Right. Definitely looking at the TEKS.
Yes.
Just because our curriculum is not like Texas TEK aligned, it's New York aligned. And so that's something we're, like, my kindergarten team is facing right now, because we're trying to make sure they're prepared for first grade. So there's things that they need to know before getting to first grade that our curriculum is not giving them. So we're having to go through it as a team to, like, look what's ahead, see if it's to the level it's supposed to be at, because our next module is decomposing and composing teen numbers, which for kindergarten, you don't have to know how to decompose teen numbers, you just have to know the number.
Identify.
Yeah. And so we're going through that to see what some things that we can kind of put on the back burner when our curriculum didn't actually have it. So, like, money sense is really low in Eureka. Number writing and just, like, number knowledge was kind of on the lower end of our curriculum, so we're trying to push that back up, and just noting it for next year of, like, what was missed in our curriculum and then where we could add it in. So just making sure that we're sticking to the TEKS and kind of just checking off those boxes of, like, okay, this is where we hit that TEK, this is where we hit that TEK, and just making sure that we get the money for first grade.
Okay. Have y'all met with any of the first grade teachers to see if they're having the same problem with their books, to where maybe, like, there are teaching materials that should be covered in kindergarten?
We met with them kind of when Eureka first, like, they gave us Eureka when we were all kind of complaining about it, just because it was something new. They said that it was a little above level for the first graders. We haven't met with them recently about Eureka, just because I think we're all kind of at a, like, do your own thing when it comes to, like, math lessons, and just make sure you're hitting the TEKS and you're doing what needs to be done to get them ready for the next grade. So we probably should meet with Eureka, but we haven't met with Eureka like the team about it specifically. No.
Right. I mean, because if you're using the TEKS resource, it's got everything lined out.
Yeah.
So maybe with the Eureka Math, maybe sitting down and having that lined out, you can see if there may be some pieces of that can be moved to kindergarten.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
All right. Some more questions. How do you anticipate possible student misunderstandings in the lessons that you're creating, and proactively develop teaching techniques to handle those concerns?
I feel like that's definitely tricky for me, just because, like, I'm a first year teacher, so I can't, like, look back on knowledge of, like, past kids, past teachings, past, like, oh, last year I did this lesson this way, let me try it a different way. But really knowing my kids and knowing what level they're at, I can honestly say I want to teach this lesson, and I can pretty much tell you who's going to grasp it and who can't. And so I think of that, and then I think, okay, well, if Billy's not going to grasp it this way, what is something that can help him grasp it? So if Billy's really a visual learner and he needs a lot of touching things, just making sure I have that ready for his needs. Or Sally is, like, auditory, so you wanted to learn the number 11, let's have a song ready for you. So just making sure that I know my kids and how they learn, and that I'm hitting everyone's needs.
Okay.
Is important.
I'll come back to that in a minute. I had something I was going to ask you.
Okay.
Well, I know what I was going to ask. So, being that you, like you said, you're the first year student, so you can't reflect back on your knowledge of last year.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of a lesson, and you're seeing, like, you plan it out, but then you're in the middle of lesson, and you're seeing that it's not going the way you thought it was in your head, and the kids aren't quite picking up on it, or how do you adjust that?
I have run across that, especially now that we're doing subtraction, and I think it was like one day I was trying to teach it late in the day, and my kids were just not. It was not clicking with them, and I was like, guys, we started this yesterday. I know you can do this. So I just went like back to basics. So we just started from the beginning and just kind of a quicker pace of reviewing, and then definitely more movement on that day, just because part of the reason they weren't grasping it and comprehending it was just because they were already tired by that time. So just making sure that the next day in the morning we reviewed it when they were like wide awake and ready to like get it into their brain, and that helped a lot.
So as you're kind of going through this and kind of figuring this out, how are you prepping to be prepared for that next year?
Not, which I definitely should be, because I like Eureka, and that's like not really a thing that I've heard around my side of the school. So, and I see that it helps my kids grow a lot, just because it sets high expectations, because it is a little more advanced in some parts, but they can reach it. And so I definitely need to jot down like, this is what helped this kid, or this is what we did for this lesson. And
I would recommend that. I mean, because sometimes, you know, a program comes along and, you know, teachers will resist against it, because it's something that's not familiar with them. It's not something that they're usually doing. So, you know, if it's working for your kids and it's what we're requiring, you know, you to be using, you know, do that and figure out the ins and outs. And then as you're getting it going and becoming successful with it, you know, then the others might start to come on board.
Right.
You know, you can be there to help them with that.
I just worry because I don't want to put all this like energy, my energy into like noting things, getting things ready for next year, when there's just going to be a new like math curriculum. I don't know how that works.
Right.
Like, does it change like frequently?
No, not usually.
Okay.
And I do believe that the contract with Eureka Math is, I think 2 years, 3 years, so it will be around. And, you know, math, a lot of times it is, you know, this is a little bit different because of the state, and the grant that went along with it. But a lot of times, you know, it depends on your district, but your texts are going to be supplement. So, you know, you use certain things from it as your supplement, and, you know, then you pull in other things. The main goal is that, you know, you're covering those TEKS, you're making it student-centered, and there's differentiation in that. So, you know, you may find that there's parts of as a whole later on, you know, there's parts of the Eureka Math you don't like, but there are certain parts that you know work with your kids and you use that.
Okay.
How do you integrate learning objectives with other disciplines in the real world experience? So like, here's what your TEK says, and this is what you're planning on teaching in your lesson. How do you tie that into them making that connection? And this isn't something I'm just going to use in the classroom, but it's used, you know, outside of the classroom in the real world.
Definitely not as much as I should, I guess. The only thing I would think of is like money. We are going over it now, so we go over like the coins, how much they're worth, and I guess just like what you need to do to get money, what you use money for. And then social studies. But I think that's like the only like real world
the economics part of it.
Comprehend like the outside in kind of deal that I bring in.
Well, and so when I observed your lesson, and you were doing the word problems on the board, and you know, you were talking about the ducks. I think they were ducks. And you know, there were so many ducks, and then so many left, and the kids, you know, drew the pictures on the board, and then they had to write their numbers in it.
Right.
You know, that's putting the counting and the adding and subtracting into the real world. So when you know, you make up your word problems, that you don't have to use the same problems that come from Eureka Math.
Right.
You know, you can make up word problems related to your kids in your classroom, experiences that y'all have going on. So like this week y'all were doing Dr. Seuss, you know, and you might talk about, you know, make up a problem with the green eggs and ham, and y'all ate green eggs,
Yeah.
and and then you could do a problem where, I have so many kids in my classroom, and so many of the good kids, didn't like them. How many kids liked the green eggs? It's using the kids' names and experiences that they deal with every day. So, little Johnny went up to bat 3 times, and he hit balls twice. You know what I mean? Just kind of, but putting their names in it and putting it into everyday experiences that they deal with, that's kind of making that connection in the real world. Okay. Like a story going to the grocery store, or whatever. But anytime you can connect it to them and then connect it to activities that they might deal in their everyday life, that's kind of tying it in. When you're talking about shapes, you talk about shapes that's going to be around them. So just anytime you can throw little things in there like that. Okay. So, if you could refine your routines and procedures, what would you do differently, and why?
I would definitely, I think, go over carpet behavior more. Mm-hmm. Just because I feel like I'm a broken record when it comes to, like, on your bottom, don't throw that, stop playing with your whiteboard marker, and just hitting that and making sure that we're following that procedure. Mm-hmm. Just because we spend a lot of time on the carpet doing things like as a whole group. Mm-hmm. And I have some friends who are really great at it, and some friends who just need like constant reminders. Mm-hmm. So definitely that.
Okay. How do you plan to address inappropriate behavior should that become an issue during your instruction?
Usually I'll like tell them to fix it, and then I expect them to fix it, and if not, I remove them from that area. Mm-hmm. Until they can show me that they're ready to come back. Okay. And so I have Billy, who likes to roll around on the carpet. I tell him to fix it, and if he does it again, then I'll tell him to find his chair, and he can do he can do the math lesson at his table. Mm-hmm. But then when I see that he's actually participating, he's following along, and he's sitting right, then I will ask him if they're ready to come back, and usually it's fixed right then because they want to be included with the class.
Okay. When you're teaching your lessons, how and what are you looking for in your students to know that they are actively engaged?
When it comes to the math lesson you saw, I'm looking to make sure that they're kind of following along with what's on the board. Mm-hmm. So if I have up a number bond, I'm looking to see if they're actually putting that number bond onto their whiteboard, mm-hmm. Or if they're putting that many ducks, or sometimes it's circles because they can't draw ducks. Mm-hmm. And that they're just following along with the lesson, but also sometimes I look to see if I have friends who are steps ahead because they already comprehend the information. And then I'm looking for friends who can't put specific things on whiteboards because they need help, or they need a one-on-one, or they need me to kind of talk them through it again. So just usually I try to see if what they're doing aligns with what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. on the Promethean board.
Okay. How do you subtly reinforce positive behavior and intercept misbehavior fluidly? So,
when it comes to when I'm teaching whole group, I'm not, this is gonna sound bad, but I don't reinforce positive behavior as much as I know I should, now that I'm thinking about it, just because I'm so focused on making sure that I'm teaching the lesson. Mm-hmm. and that they're listening, that I'm not oh, Cindy, you're sitting so good, or Cindy, I love the way you're drawing that number bond. I'll throw it in there sometimes, but I'm not putting that into my brain of you need to make sure to make that a point. Mm-hmm. I do it throughout the day, but I definitely need to make sure that I'm making a point because it will help. Mm-hmm. Reinforce the positive behaviors. The negative, I kind of just tell them to fix it.
Right. Okay. see. I think I did that one. Yeah. All right. So, I'll just make sure I had asked all of my questions that I had wanted to ask you. So when I was in the room and watching the lesson, I was very impressed, with what the kids were doing with the Eureka Math. Like I said, it was challenging. It was definitely this. I saw students doing things a lot more advanced than what kids were expected to do or what they were doing when I had taught kindergarten.
Yeah.
To see them actually, not just identifying the numbers, but the fact that they were taking the snap cubes and then I was watching them count and then they were taking away and then they were putting it together. And like I said, when you took it from the whiteboards and they were drawing on the whiteboard. So, you started the lesson with, them counting, you did a few examples using the number bonds on the board, you walking through it and then y'all did it together, to them doing the snap cubes and then them doing it independently but together on the whiteboards, the problem solving part, and then going into independent practice. One of the things though that I did notice was that I felt like you were a little bit standoffish or hesitant.
Okay.
I feel like part of that was mainly because there were observers in the room before I entered, and then I came in, and that kind of threw your kids off. And then just having so many people that kind of took away your comfort zone with your kids.
Yeah.
And you are a soft-spoken person, anyways. But don't be afraid to.
No, I'm just saying if y'all were here, I'd be nosy.
Don't be afraid to threw me off there, to redirect your kids and get them back on task. But it doesn't always have to be a verbal command or something that you say. That I noticed you have a lot of chanting that you do with your kids, but at a certain point in time, the routines there and the procedures there, that was very obvious. But after a while, they do it because that's what's expected of them, but they don't always follow through with the actions.
Right.
So sometimes that's where the nonverbal positives come in, or nonverbal redirecting. Sometimes you could do like I said, a compliment where you're like, Susie, I like the way, you're sitting. Oh, Susie, you're doing a great job. Thank you for being ready for me.
Right.
Sometimes that will just bring them back in because they want to please their teachers. Sometimes it could be you have marbles in the jar, and every time, you kept somebody doing good without saying anything at all, you just put a marble in the jar, and, they know that if they get the jar full of marbles, they get a treat, or it could be tally marks on the board. It could be good job stickers. You have a sticker right there, and it's right there by your board, so it's all convenient. But you never have to stop doing your lesson, or you never have to stop doing what they're doing.
Right.
In order, they just start becoming more aware of it. So that might be something to try. When you're walking down the hallway, I think I'll put a marble in the jar. Or however you want to do it.
Okay.
When I taught, older kids, I did good job tickets. I just bought those cheap tickets you buy at Walmart, and I kept them in my pocket. They got washed a lot. But, I just quietly walk by and just, stick one in a kid's hand. And, at the beginning of the year, I explained to them, when I give you a ticket, when you get an opportunity, write your name on it. And I had a bucket they knew to drop it in. When I started the routine, I would just do it 2 or 3 times during the day for small prizes, a pencil, an eraser, and then it got to be at the end of the week, every week that I was drawing. And then, it might be, every couple of weeks, but, and then depending on how many tickets were in the jar, if I only had a few, I might draw 1 or 2 names. If I had a lot, I would draw a lot of names, and then, it could be for a pencil, it might be for no shoes in class. It might be to have lunch with me that day. You know, I mean, it just can be simple things.
Mhm.
And they learn the more chances the more tickets they get, the more chances they have to have their name drawn. So you just kind of find some different things that work, but that are nonverbal. And like I said, put it towards a reward system to encourage the positive.
Okay.
Don't stop with, you know, correcting students that are misbehaving and not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But for some of those just minor things, it kind of stops you from having to stop your lesson, but at the same time, not ignoring it, because it starts like a domino. One starts doing, like I noticed when you were doing the snap cubes, you had one student who was kind of in her own world, and she started snapping them and putting them on her fingers, and she was playing. And then she did that for a while, and then she tapped over to her neighbor and showed him, and then he started doing it, and then it was just a domino. You had about 3 or 4 of that.
Yes.
You know, luckily it was at the end, but you know, it was just, they were more intrigued with making, you know, so just little things like that. Like I said, you don't, it's not always, but just every once in a while, kind of to prevent that domino fall. One starts and then, you know, the other. So that would be one of the things that I would like to see you kind of work on. Like I said, not that anything was bad in class, but I think it would be a plus with your kids.
Okay.
So the next time that I come in and kind of observe lessons, I would like to see how you've kind of implemented some nonverbal cues with your kids.
Okay.
And you know, kind of see how that goes. Just because they're little kids and short attention spans, they do need quite a few more reminders.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm interested to see how that is.
Okay.
So, do you have any other questions, or how do you feel about that? Think that's something you could work on?
Yes, I think it's definitely something that I can add going into like teaching. I didn't want to be like a reward system teacher because I expect you to act right because it's what's expected of you. Granted, they are 5.
Yes.
And I like you said, I like to know that when I do something good, there will be a reward. So I get that at 5 years old, they need that reward system. So I think I'm excited.
Right. And it's just part of the training. Like you said, you want them to work towards, you know, it's the honor thing. I mean, you know, you do something because it's the right thing to do and because you're expected to. But at the same time, they're 5 and their attentions are short and they forget. You know, at that age, they're in the moment now.
Yeah.
And so they don't stop and think. So but if you start training them, I mean, think about it, you know, getting a new puppy. Sounds bad to compare a dog, but you know, when you get a new puppy, you want to teach them to go outside. So you give them little rewards, little, you know, bribes, and eventually they start to figure it out and do it independently and on their own.
Okay.
So, okay, well, thank you for visiting with me today, and I look forward to coming in your classroom again.
Yeah.